everyone, and welcome to our GDG Jam! Woo! Yeah! Finally, you get to actually make a goddamn game! Woo! Yeah! Alright, hope you guys are all excited. I'm very happy that there's so many of you coming to this. Like, this is an amazing turnout. I hope you guys are ready to make a game. Yeah? Yeah. Alright, let's get on to it. First of all, this is what GDG Jam is. Unlike the launch night, I am not going to bore you with too many details, but basically the general structure will be you're going to hear a prompt or a theme, you're going to form teams with a bunch of you guys, or even maybe go solo, but I wouldn't suggest that. You get a time limit, so the time limit will be 2 months. You are going to find resources and hopefully improve your skills while you're working on this game. You're going to showcase it at the end and potentially win awards. And finally, you get to learn from your mistakes and maybe make a better game next time. All right? Just know, this is not a competitive event. We're not trying to bid you guys against anything. There's no real cash prizes or anything to be one of this. I do have little awards for you guys just based on how much effort you put into your games. But generally speaking, we try to have fun. We try to make sure that we can all make games that people can enjoy and just have a nice collaborative time. Yeah. So, what makes this is meant to animate. So, what makes a game? So first of all, you have the ideation stage. This is where you try to conceive an idea for your game, right? Then you might consider making a team, thinking of the design and mechanics of the game, and then also potentially getting the engines and tools that you want for your game. Then you might consider all these other factors. The main one would be coding, right? Because obviously to make a game, you need a bit of code. But even without that, you will also want to focus on the music, on the writing, and even the music and sound effects. And the art as well, yeah. And finally, you have to think about the assembly, testing, and building. So that's the final stage of making a game. We actually assemble it together, make the game, make it for release, and test it out to make sure there aren't too many bugs. And voila, you have a game. What makes a game? Yeah, like I said, you try to brainstorm an idea, you try to plan all the resources you might need, you try to make a very basic prototype, so that's a sort of minimum viable product where it's a very, very shitty version of the game that is to be, just so you know that it actually works. Then you try to iron out the flaws and implement your other features, the assets, the additional levels, all that malarkey. Then you try to finish the assets and try to put everything together, and obviously you do some testing and submit and play. So yeah. So, when it comes to making a game, especially in our club, there will be two ways to make it, right? You can either form a team with a variety of skill sets, art, music, coding, writing, or even just game design. Or you try to do it solo. Now, if you do a team, which most of you will be doing, we highly suggest you have a coder in your team so, they can actually code the game. But beyond that, we also want you guys to have a variety of skill sets so that you have a nice game and a nice teamwork frame. If you do go solo, I beg you that you have made a game before you even try to do that, because making a game is still surprisingly hard. So yeah, all right.
Before we progress any further, we do have some videos that we'd like you to watch. One on making your first game jam, one on some practical rules for a game jam, and the other one on actually having a game present after you're finished and not just a half-baked product, essentially. Well, not a half-baked product, but basically something that you can actually play. So let's watch those two.
We're going to stick to giving you the best practices for how to actually approach the project itself. So, for your first game, tip number 1, don't plan a project that you think will take you more than a month. Remember, you're going to be getting better with every game you build, and you'll actually often be better off just tossing your first project aside and starting from scratch after you've gotten it out there and learned all you can from it. Tip number 2. It's gonna take you more than a month, but don't sweat it. You won't have much frame of reference when you're planning that first game you're gonna create, and even the most hardened professionals have learned over time to just take their best scheduling estimate and then add 50% to it. Because surprises always come up in game development, and each game presents its own unique challenges. So if you overshoot your 1-month deadline, don't panic, it happens. But if you're coming up on 3 months, well, you probably scoped too large. Take what you've learned and start something smaller next time. Tip number 3. Don't worry too much about the design of your first game. It kills James to say this, but don't spend weeks designing systems or mechanics that you don't even know if you can implement yet. Just get to building something as quickly as you can. The experience is way more valuable than the end results this time around. Tip number 4, set milestones. This one sounds obvious, but it can be so easy to ignore on a small project. If you estimate your project should take you about a month, set yourself a milestone goal for every week. Tip number 5, take those big milestone tasks and break them down even further. As you plan, any tasks that you've listed as taking more than a week is probably best broken down into smaller tasks. This is true for pretty much any game you'll ever build. Build graphics engine or complete character art are way too big to be tasks. Implement hardware instancing or rig main character. Those are at least closer. Even those can probably be broken down further. Having a granular task list will help you plan better, keep you on track, and make you feel like you're really accomplishing things as you tick them off the list. Tip number 6, send yourself producer emails. At the beginning of each week, send yourself an email saying what you did last week and what you plan to do this week. Then compare that with last week's email. This is a quick and dirty way of making sure that things don't fall off the production schedule, and it will help you organize your time each week. Tip number 7, review your game at least once a week. Even if life gets hectic, if your job or school gets in the way of you making a lot of progress on your game, make yourself at least look at your game just for a half hour once a week. It's really, really easy to let 2 weeks slip by without touching your game, and then when you finally get back to it, finding yourself totally lost and not remembering what you were doing or where you were at. This is the point at which a lot of people quit. Don't let that happen to you. Tip number 8, don't worry about production values. A lot of people get derailed by trying to make their first game look or sound good. Don't worry about that. If your game plays amazing, you'll have plenty of time to work on the polish later. But unless you're adding one of those polish touches just to learn how to do it, none of it matters for your first game. Keep in mind, there are a lot of great games out there that are made of nothing but moving squares. Tip number 9, don't spend more than 1 hour trying to do anything yourself. If you find yourself stuck on a problem, take a stab at it because it'll help you learn, but you shouldn't be spending more than an hour on any individual problem in your game. Given that it's your first game, everything you're trying to do probably has an excellent tutorial out there for it. Use those resources. One of the most common quitting points for first-time developers is spending a week making no progress on a problem that the world at large could have helped them solve in minutes. I know that many of us, myself included, want to solve everything ourselves, but take advice from someone who's learned this the hard way. Don't try to do that. And finally, tip number 10, make people play your game. I know that we mentioned this last time, but this is incredibly important. You will learn an unbelievable amount just from seeing how people play what you've created. It's easy to be embarrassed or shy about these things, and it's easy to look at other games out there and say, wow, my game does not measure up to that. I'll show people my game once I have something that does. But trust me, the path to making great games is marked by all the realizations you'll have from people actually playing your earlier work. Don't deny yourself that incredible resource. Hopefully these guidelines should serve to help you get your first game out in no time. Well, 3 months at most. If you find yourself struggling, cut stuff. Find the smallest possible game you can make. Make that. Once that's done, find 1 or 2 new things that you'd like to experiment with, and base your next game around those ideas. If you keep things small and you can keep blazing your way through these projects, you'll find that by the time a year's out, you'll really be able to make games that let you experiment with a huge range of design ideas and game types. And if you're wondering just how to keep your game small, join us on the next episode for a dive into prototyping and the idea of minimum viable product. See you then. During the last 2 episodes, we've stressed how important it is to make your first game something small. But this is so important that this time we're going to dedicate the entire episode to it. This will serve you in good stead not only when you're creating your first game, but also when prototyping for anything else you do. In development, there's a term called minimum viable product, which refers to the smallest thing you can possibly make that'll still give you useful data once released. That should be your goal. Even when James is called in to work on a multi-million-dollar project that has a development time of 3 years, one of the first things he'll tell them is that if they don't have a prototype up in the first 3 weeks, they're doing it wrong. When you can actually play your game, you'll discover all sorts of things that you didn't account for when you were just designing the game in your head. You'll find edge cases where your mechanics are broken, or places where your game just falls apart. You'll find what's really engaging rather than just trying to build something that you hope is engaging. And you'll discover what will add the most to the experience you're creating. Okay, so you've heard me say cut and cut and cut, and that when you think you're done cutting, you're probably not done cutting, but you do have to stop cutting sometimes. So how do we determine when we're down to that minimum viable product? Well, this one is a bit tough, and you're going to get better at it with experience, but the basic idea is to find the absolute minimum set of features that won't affect core development. If you could cut a feature and still technically ship your game, it's probably not part of your minimum viable product. But because this is as much an art as it is a science, let's run through some examples so we're all on the same footing. Let's start with Super Mario Bros. What do we need in order to test if the fundamental gameplay of Super Mario Bros. Is engaging? What's the minimum that we can build and test before deciding if what we have is something worth expanding upon with additional features? Well, do we need Koopas? No. Fire flowers? Nope. Bowser? Nope. Pipes that you can climb down? No. Pipes at all? No. Water levels, mushrooms, hidden blocks, extra lives? No, 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 no. So what do we need? Well, for Mario, the minimum viable product is probably one level where you can move, jump, and fall into pits. That's it. If just that much is engaging, you'll be able to add all those other features later and make it even better. But if running along and jumping over pits doesn't feel good, Super Mario Bros. Simply doesn't work, no matter how many extra features you throw in. So you've got to make sure that that core is working first. Although, in this particular case, I'd probably throw in 2 other features that aren't strictly necessary, but they will make a big difference. First, a trigger which resets the level if the player falls into the pit, just so testing is easier, and to make sure that this aspect isn't just unpalatable to players. And second, the ability to change from walking to running, since the Mario jump mechanic is so dependent on the run button. But that's it. 1 level, 3 features, and you've got a game. Don't believe something this simple could be engaging? Well, set the character to auto-run and you've basically built Cannibalt. When building your first game, or prototyping a larger one, you'll find that you can strip out all of the content, all of the things that aren't rules that control the play itself, but rather elements that are created out of those rules. So enemy types, levels, different weapons, all of that can usually get cut. You might want to include one thing from each category just to test the larger rules, but no more than that, because it's really easy to get mired down in making all of that content. And the truth is, games with lots of content but without a solid foundation are rarely good. Perhaps worse, as a creator, when your game's packed with content, it's generally harder to figure out why the foundation's not working. If you test your prototype with a lot of content thrown in, it'll be harder for players to put their fingers on exactly what it is that needs improvement, as all of that content just clutters what's wrong, and they'll be more likely to tell you about bad pieces of content rather than the underlying reasons why that content didn't create a positive experience. It just adds complexity in a situation where you really need to be honing your game's core foundation. Okay, so let's try another one. Old school JRPGs. Now this one can fool people because most designers tend to think of these games in terms of content rather than gameplay. It's easy to get caught up in the story you want to tell, or the massive lists of items and enemies. But if the player has to slog through 80 hours of weak gameplay in order to access that story you've got in mind, you've done your player a disservice. In fact, that's some of what's contributed to the decline in the popularity of traditional JRPGs this decade. So take a game like Final Fantasy IV. Here, I would cut everything but the menu-based combat system. I would even cut out all the graphics. Monsters can just be words on the screen. That's really all you need to test the system. Now, many of you might object, saying, but that doesn't work. I can't make that engaging without the content. This is actually great, though. It immediately tells us that we should probably find a more robust system. All right, let's try one more. This time, let's look at Ikaruga. Here, we could probably cut down to the color switching mechanic, an enemy which switches color randomly and shoots random bullet patterns, or maybe randomly chooses from a small list of pre-built bullet patterns, as that wouldn't be too hard to construct. Also, you'll need the ability for the player to move and to shoot, a counter which ticks upward as you shoot the enemy, and a death mechanic that simply resets the game when the player gets hit. This will get you all the player behavior you need to find out if your game's engaging. Your players will try to dodge and shoot the enemy while attempting to take advantage of the color swapping system as much as possible. That's all you need. Hopefully, that helps you frame your thinking about just how small your first project should be.
When it comes to actually making the game, there's a lot of ways to get the resources for it, right? There's a lot of software and engines that you might use. You know, Unreal Engine, Unity Engine, Godot, Game Maker, RPG Maker, all of them. A lot of people is great for like actually making the game in, but you might also consider the tools you want to use for making your assets. So as a pixel artist, I use Sprite, but you might also use Krita or Photoshop or even Procreate to make your art. Blender and Maya for all your 3D modeling, LMMS, FL Studio, GarageBand, whatever have you for your music, and even just for like coding, you might want to use Notepad or like Writer or like VS Code or that kind of stuff. And even like consider like, where you guys might like put all your resources. Maybe you're going to put it on GitHub, maybe on like G Drive, maybe you'll have like a dedicated Google like Doc so that you can like discuss where your ideas are going to be formed and placed, right? But even if you can't actually make all those assets, because at the end of the day, there's not that many of us, you might consider like getting like stuff from online. So you might find art on opengameart.org, or music from Free Sound or Free Music Archive. Maybe even like finding assets for your games from the Unity Asset Store or Godot Asset Library. And also just, make it yourself. But there are a lot of resources online for you guys to actually find things to quickly assemble your game. Because we want you guys to work smart, not too hard, right? So we're kind of racing through this. But here's a theme reveal. Drum roll, please. Escape. Ooh. How are you going to form a game around that? I wonder. Well, you have to think that up yourself, but also we have some additional modifiers that you might want to apply to your game. Now, these modifiers are going to be like sort of sub-challenges that you might want to apply to your game, but we only suggest you maybe do one at max, and only if you have actually made a game before. But if you would like a bit of a challenge, go for them. So the first modifier will be make your game using really bright and really saturated colors. That is one of the potential ones you can do. The second one is a general modifier. Implement an in-game scoreboard. The third one is make the game feel bouncy. So you might choose to do one, you might choose to do none. We do not suggest you do all three because that's a lot. We beg you to just maybe do one at max, but you have all these options for potentially spicing up your game alongside the initial theme of escape. All right, so next up, we're blitzing through this, but I want you guys to all individually brainstorm a game idea. You can try to do this by yourself, as I said, or you can try to ideate with your neighbor next to you. Try to come up with something interesting, spicy, and at the end of this breakout session, we're gonna ask you guys to raise your hand if you have an idea, and then you come outside with me so you can potentially discuss that idea with me and some of our teammates, and then you get back in and you present your game ideas, especially if you would like to do it as a game. And based on your ideas, everyone move around and you get to form your teams. So yeah, until step 5, we're not going to be forming a team right now, so don't get into that. But do try to form some ideas and just have a nice time doing that. All right, hello breakout time. Theme again is escape. Go for it.
Hello, editing Josh here. In here we have an example of what a potential studio's timeline will be. After the idea is made, they will start to break it down to the smallest of tasks and start planning to what needs to be done, what are the core features of the game, prioritize on which task needs to be done first, develop the core mechanics, abilities, enemies, and making the game work with the core assets, characters, dialogues, and time lapse, all leading up to an MVP or demo. Once that's done, we move on to adding more features in if we have time, which would be either a save system, adding further abilities, polish, playtesting, and feedback to make to further balance the game, animations, music, SFX, and so on. And then it will all lead up to release. It's your first time doing a jam, and then at some point in the 3 to 5 weeks, you start going to the character controls, making the base level, core mechanics of the game, and the core assets that you will be using for your project. After that, in the last couple of weeks, we expect you to go for making the main level, UI along with sound, dialogue, animations, SFX, and then potentially showing the game in the showcase night. Considering these factors, work smart, not hard. Use guides, resources, anything you can't make. You need to just go through YouTube or go through any forum that you can think of and just learn your way as you go. And most importantly, play to your team's strength. Most of the teams we've seen so far are actually teams of 5 to 6 people. Check out who's the coder, check out who's the artist, who's interested in making dialogue, sound, and so on, so that you can actually play to your strengths and get a good team synergy going along. Because it's not a race, it's a marathon. You're not trying to win a prize, you're trying to learn as you go. You're not making the next AAA MMORPG out there. You're just making a simple indie game. You only have 2 months. You don't have a lot of time to make the game. So if you spend too much time on making a tiny feature, move on. Prioritize what needs to be done. Prioritize what are your core features for a game. Mistakes happen. Maybe a feature doesn't go as planned. Other times something gets broken or left unfinished. That's completely fine. The whole point of this jam is to learn from your mistakes and how to manage it better next time. All of this is more of a learning experience. You're just learning as you go. Game jams encourages scrappiness. As mentioned before, our game jam officer Ben will be contacting team leads weekly to do a check-in or stand-up with them just to see team progress, and this will help out with advice, progress checks, suggestions, and so don't be scared to reach out to them. And we do also have mentors in the server. Drop-in sessions will be provided later after the first couple of tutorials, so if you want to ask for in-person feedback and help.
Alright, one by one these leaders are going to announce their games, and remember, we are not fixed to our teams. You are free to move to any of these team ideas if you want. They are all going to announce their games, and afterwards they are going to write it up here, if we're all cool with that. Yeah? Alright, one by one, please come up to the podium here, and please announce your game. Do not trip on that.
I'm thinking a very, very deeply unserious 2D platformer about a guy escaping a mental asylum. And because often there are padded walls in mental asylums, we could do a lot of bouncy mechanics with that. And I think it could be fun. It could go in like a portal direction where there's a bunch of different mechanics that make getting to the end a bit of a puzzle. Or it could just be mechanical challenge where everything's really bouncy, which could be kind of random and silly.
Falls into a dream, and then he tries to escape the dream. I don't know. And then on the start, he's in the deep dream, so it's gonna be like really dark. And then as the stage progresses, the dream's gonna get brighter, and then the stage is also gonna get brighter with high saturation. Oh yeah, and we're gonna have multiple stages, where each stage is like 2D. It's gonna be either platform, where you can maneuver your character like Geometry Dash, or it's gonna be like Pac-Man with bird eye view. Alright, so we're gonna make really easy program for programmers. So if you guys wanna come, it's already full.
I'm sorry, I'm going to keep bothering you with this the entire night, but this is essentially ADHD Simulator. Basically, you know all those like procrastination games like Flappy Bird, Cookie Clitter, that type of stuff? And you know how you're normally not supposed to be doing that in class? Well, you're supposed to do that in our game. Basically, you're supposed to have a screen in front of you, you're going to be ideally playing multiple games at once, and the more games you play or the more tabs you have open, the more points you get. But if a tutor catches you while you're doing that, you lose the game. Also, the more stuff you have open, the brighter and more noisier things get, and of course, the more suspicious it becomes, and that will just affect the tutor's behavior, how often they'll pop in, how much warning you actually have before you have to tab out of everything. And yeah, of course, everything will get more colorful, chaotic, and a bit harder to actually play. But again, you will be rewarded for the better you do in the actual games. They'll affect multipliers or whatever. But yeah, we are trying to go for I think two out of the 3 goals, so might get a little bit more intensive. Oh, and right. So I'm currently just the only person on the team so far. I have more of a creative and art background, some game design. I have a passing familiarity with code, so program is welcome, art is welcome. Yeah.
My group and I, we came up with this idea about a skeleton that's stuck in a whale, right? You play as a skeleton and you have to escape the whale, but it's like a metaphysical whale. It represents purgatory. So when you go through the whale, you're actually confronting your memories of your life before you became a skeleton. And as you go through the whale, you become less and less of a skeleton and more of an actual person. But we're going to be heavily focusing on art and writing. It'll just be a 2D side scroller, so hopefully it'll be simple for whoever decides to become a programmer. Please help us. This is a cry for help. And maybe we can have a musician too if anyone's into that. So like, yeah, man. And you like crawl out of the whale's mouth, you know, as an ending.
So my team was like, let's do a simple concept, but really polish it to the most potential it can have, and really have some interesting core gameplay mechanics and style. So we chose a temple run kind of side-scrolling runner. You know, whether the setting's going to be in a cyberpunk space or a jungle base, you know, we're thinking about that. But yeah, you know, it's a 2D side-scroller. You're running away from a creepy monster. And yeah, there's going to be obstacles there. And we're going to be adding interesting mechanics, maybe bouncy platforms. Obviously, the saturation, you know, will be high for that challenge. And that's about it so far. So we need an artist and a coder. That's what we're looking for.
I was thinking maybe there could be a planet and you could orbit it and try to escape the orbit of celestial bodies, like by grabbing objects, maybe assembling them into little spaceships, maybe sacrificing a bit of your oxygen tank to try and thrust out, or throwing objects, pulling objects towards you to try and be debalanced to gravity, and maybe we could introduce lots of other puzzle mechanics like gravity gun or something.
Yeah, my team has come up with an idea of a 2D puzzle platformer where the concept is the keyboard itself, where a bunch of the keys kind of fall into the computer itself, and you have to try to find the escape key to escape the game. And basically how we're going to do it is it's going to be level-based. This is an idea, of course, where you have to open up the enter key into the computer to system 32, and you have to go through each level to find the missing keycaps that have gone missing in the computer itself. And by completing each level, you find the missing keycaps to restore your keyboard again. So yeah, it's going to be like puzzles for each like level. It's a pretty cool concept, and we've got a team of 4 right now. We've got 2 coders, me, an audio music guy, and an art person. And yeah, that's our idea basically.
You're driving a van in the middle of a desert, and the van is slowly going off-road, but you also have a meth lab in the back of the van that you need to maintain. And there are people chasing you, trying to stop you from cooking your meth. That's kind of the premise of the game. It's going to require a lot of multitasking. You're going to have to switch between dealing with all the different issues and try not to get caught. Yeah.
We're making a 3D game where the concept is basically you're parkouring through a level, but the only way to see what's in front of you is to throw a ball that will light up the environment, or like a glow stick, or just an object. And then that is essentially the idea of the game. Very basic. Yeah.
So that's 8 ideas, and I know like 1 or 2 people might be solo developing, but if you have more ideas, just come up to me if you would like to present it again. But otherwise, yeah, feel free to mingle around and potentially find someone else to like add to your team, or join another team, or whatever have you. Yeah. I'll let you guys talk for like another 5 minutes, and then I'll just do some final announcements, and we're sweet. Make sure you scope small. Make sure it's playable by the end of the jam, right? Like we want to make sure that you can actually play during our showcase nights. Keep an eye on Discord for like future announcements and like also just follow-ups, because I will be like talking about stuff. And our jam officer right here, he will be actually providing you like weekly checkups to make sure that you guys are developing your games. If you have any questions, if you have any issues, please contact him, or you can also just contact me. And yeah, we will give you advice, progress checks, suggestions, all that. And also, if you have any questions in general that aren't like related to the game itself, but like making the game, just ask it on Discord. I'm sure like a bunch of our friends will like help you out. They'll like be like, oh yeah, no, you can try doing this or that, you know? It's a great place to exchange advice. Also, please make sure you do not use copyrighted material. If you want to show this game off in like a big event like Armageddon, please don't use copyrighted material. We don't want to get sued. And finally, please scan the sign-up form, especially if you are the leader. Please scan that. And also, if you guys are a beginner with Unity, like a total beginner, please come next week. Ben will be doing his Unity beginner tutorial. You can
It's going to
explain.
be a super comprehensive for beginners, nothing that you couldn't just learn straight away. But the number one thing is if you are going to come, make sure you install Unity on your device you're bringing. We've got a sheet here which it tells you exactly how to do it. This one. Yeah, it's double-sided. So yeah, just come with it installed and I'll show you how to make a game from scratch in an hour and that'll be good. Next week, Monday.
Yeah, please make sure you have Unity installed for this tutorial, otherwise we cannot really help you.
Yeah.
You'll be just sitting there kind of not doing anything, but otherwise it's a great tutorial, so please come along to it. Take these handout forms so you can know how to install Unity, and yeah. Thank you all so much for coming. Good luck with your games. I'm so excited to see all these projects. Holy shit. Yeah.